The rain hammered against the windows of Blue Moon Restaurant as Gina wiped down tables for the third time that evening. Her feet ached in the cheap shoes she'd bought from a thrift store, and her back screamed from carrying heavy trays all day. The clock on the wall showed 11:47 p.m., but she couldn't leave yet. Table 6 was still nursing their expensive wine, and the kitchen staff needed help closing. "Gina, come here," called manager Kim from behind the bar. His usually stern face looked almost sympathetic tonight. "I have something that might interest you." She approached cautiously. Manager Kim only showed kindness when he needed something big. "There's a private catering job tomorrow night," he said, sliding a business card across the polished wood. "Ironwood Park's penthouse, you know. The tech billionaire. They're paying triple our usual rate." Gina's eyes widened. Triple rate meant she could finally pay her overdue electricity bill and maybe even buy groceries that weren't instant noodles. What's the catch? No catch. Just serve appetizers and drinks to about 20 guests. Rich people love to show off their fancy parties. Manager Kim shrugged. "I picked you because you don't get nervous round money like the other girls do." The next evening, Gina stood in the gleaming elevator shooting up to the top floor of Seoul's most expensive building. Her reflection stared back from the polished doors, a tired young woman in a crisp white shirt and black skirt, carrying silver trays that probably cost more than her monthly salary. The elevator chimed softly and opened to reveal a world she'd only seen in movies. The penthouse stretched endlessly, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city lights below. Expensive art hung on white walls, and soft classical music drifted through hidden speakers. "You must be from Blue Moon," said a woman in a designer dress. "I'm Miss Lee, the event coordinator. The guests will arrive in 30 minutes. Just circulate with the appetizers and refill drinks when asked." Gina nodded and headed to the kitchen, where other catering staff were arranging delicate finger foods on crystal platters. Everything looked like tiny works of art, too beautiful to eat. The guests began arriving in waves of expensive perfume and confident laughter. Gina recognized some faces from business magazines and news programs. These people controlled companies, influenced politics, and lived in a different universe than her cramped one-room apartment. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, offering smoked salmon, canapes, and champagne to people who barely acknowledged her existence. Their conversations flowed around topics she couldn't imagine: vacation homes in Switzerland, art auctions in Paris, investment opportunities in Mars colonies. Then she saw him. Ironwood Park stood near the massive windows, gesturing animatedly as he spoke to a group of investors. He looked younger than his photos, with kind eyes behind designer glasses. Everyone hung on his every word as he described some breakthrough in quantum computing. They approached with her tray of appetizers, but something on the marble mantelpiece caught her eye. Her blood turned to ice. There, in an ornate silver frame, was a photograph of herself as a 7-year-old child. She wore a faded yellow dress and had a gap-toothed smile that showed pure joy despite the poverty visible in the background. It was taken in front of the small apartment she'd shared with her parents before the fire. The tray slipped from her numb fingers, sending expensive appetizers scattering across the marble floor. The conversations round her paused as heads turned toward the clatter. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, dropping to her knees to gather the fallen food. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. "Don't worry about it," Park said kindly, kneeling beside her to help. "Accidents happen." But Gina couldn't focus on his words. The photo blazed in her peripheral vision like a beacon from another life. How could it be here? That picture had burned with everything else when the electrical fire consumed their building. 15 years ago, she'd cried for days, not just for her parents, but for all the memories turned to ash. "Excuse me," she managed to whisper when they'd cleaned up the mess and the other guests had returned to their conversations. "That photo on your mantel." Park's face drained of color. His hands, which had been steady while helping her, began to tremble. "I don't know what you mean," he said, but his voice cracked slightly. "The little girl in the yellow dress." Gina pressed, her voice barely audible. "That's me." "But that photo was destroyed years ago." Park glanced nervously round the room, then leaned closer. "You must be mistaken. It's just a stock photo I bought at an art gallery." But his trembling hands betrayed his lie. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the perfect air conditioning. When he excused himself to greet new rivals, Gina made her decision. Moving quickly while the other staff were busy in the kitchen, she approached the Montalbys. The photo was definitely her. Every detail matched her memories perfectly. Even the small scar on her chin from falling off her bicycle was visible. With shaking fingers, she lifted the frame and slipped it into her apron pocket. Her heart hammered as she rejoined the other servers, but no one seemed to notice. The wealthy guests continued their conversations about stock markets and space tourism, completely unaware that Gina's world had just turned upside down. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Gina helped pack up the remaining food and clean the kitchen. All the while, the photograph seemed to burn against her hip like a secret too dangerous to carry. Something was very wrong here, and somehow the key to understanding it all was locked away in that impossible photograph of her childhood. Gina couldn't sleep that night. The photograph sat on her tiny kitchen table, staring back at her like a puzzle piece from a life she thought she understood. At 3 a.m., she finally gave up trying to rest and called the only person who might help her make sense of this mystery. "Minho, I need your help with something weird," she said into her phone. Her childhood friend groaned on the other end. "Gina, it's 3 in the morning. Can't your crisis wait until the sun comes up? I found a photo of myself as a kid in a billionaire's house, the photo that should have burned 15 years ago." The line went quiet for a moment. "Okay, now you have my attention. Come over." Minho lived in a cluttered apartment filled with multiple computer screens, tangled cables, and empty energy drink cans. He worked as a freelance programmer, which meant he kept vampire hours and survived on caffeine and instant ramen. His fingers flew across 3 keyboards simultaneously as various programs ran complex calculations in the background. "Show me the photo first," he said, pushing his thick glasses up his nose. Gina placed the silver frame on his desk. Minho examined it carefully, turning it over and running his fingers along the edges. "This frame is expensive," he muttered. "Real silver, custom-made. See these tiny markings along the back? That's not decoration. Those look like serial numbers or tracking codes." "Tracking codes for what?" "That's what we're going to find out." Minho cracked his knuckles and turned to his main computer. "Tell me everything about this Park guy." For the next hour, Gina recounted every detail from the penthouse party while Minho's fingers danced across his keyboard. Multiple browser windows opened and closed as he dove deep into databases, corporate records, and archived news articles. "Found something," he said, highlighting text on his screen. Genesis Tech wasn't always a technology company. Back in the 1990s, Park ran a charity called Bright Future Foundation. They supposedly helped disadvantaged children get better education and health care. Supposedly, the charity shut down suddenly in 2001. All records were sealed, and Park transitioned into tech development. Minho pulled up more files, but here's where it gets interesting. "I found a leaked document from a former employee." The document appeared on screen. A list of names, birth dates, and addresses. All the children were born in the same year as Gina, and all came from poor families in Seoul. Look at what happened to these kids, Minho said, opening new tabs for each name. The first name was Daehyun Kim. His photo showed a serious-looking man in a white lab coat standing next to some kind of glowing device that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. He's the lead scientist at the International Space Research Center, Minho read aloud. Last month, he announced a breakthrough in faster-than-light communication technology. The news said he figured out how to send messages across galaxies instantly. The next name was Sujin Park. Her photo showed a young woman holding 3 gold medals, but what caught Gina's attention was the background. She was standing in front of what looked like a massive spaceship. 3 Olympic gold medals in zero-gravity athletics. Minho continued, wait, zero-gravity athletics. When did that become an Olympic sport? It didn't, Gina whispered. At least, not in any Olympics I've heard of. They continued down the list. Taiholi had invented solar panel technology that was supposedly 40 times more efficient than anything currently available. His company's headquarters looked like a crystalline structure that seemed to float above the ground. Min Seo-yoon worked as a xenobiologist, a job title that shouldn't exist since humanity had never encountered alien life. Her research facility was located in what the article described as off-world laboratories. This doesn't make sense, Gina said, feeling dizzy. Half these jobs don't exist, and the other half sound like they're from 100 years in the future. Minho leaned back in his chair, staring at the screens. Either we've stumbled onto the world's most elaborate hoax, or there's something much bigger going on here. He opened another program and began cross-referencing the names with government databases, international records, and even classified documents he probably shouldn't have access to. Gina, look at this, he said, his voice tight with excitement and fear. I hacked into some satellite imagery from last week. Look at Daehyun's research facility. The image showed a complex of buildings that looked normal from the outside. But Minho zoomed in on the parking area. Instead of cars, there were sleek vehicles that hovered 3 feet off the ground. In the background, something that looked distinctly like a spacecraft was partially visible behind a hangar. And here's Sujin's training facility, he continued, bringing up another image. The facility was built into the side of a mountain, but the training grounds were clearly visible through transparent domes. Athletes were practicing in what appeared to be zero-gravity, floating and spinning through the air like astronauts. This is impossible, Gina breathed, if this technology exists. Why isn't the whole world talking about it? Minho pulled up news. Articles from the past 5 years. Maybe they are, but we're not hearing about it. Look at these headlines. They're all buried in back pages or science journals that nobody reads. The headlines made Gina's head spin. Breakthrough in anti-gravity propulsion. First successful interstellar communication. Discovery of habitable planets in nearby systems. Development of universal translation technology. It's like there's a whole other world operating alongside us, Minho said quietly. A world where humanity has already made contact with aliens, developed impossible technology, and started exploring the galaxy. And somehow, all the kids from Park's charity are involved in it, Gina added. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the discovery settling over them. Finally, Minho turned to her with a strange expression. Gina, there's something else. According to this list, you were one of the most promising children in the program. The notes say you showed exceptional cognitive enhancement potential and remarkable adaptive capabilities. But I'm just a waitress, she protested. I barely graduated high school. I can't even balance my checkbook properly. can't you?" Minho asked softly. "Think about it. You remember every order from every table without writing anything down. You can calculate tips and bills instantly in your head. You speak 3 languages fluently, even though you never formally studied them. Didn't you once tell me you had weird dreams about flying through space?" Gina's blood ran cold. She had always assumed her abilities were just natural talent, nothing special. But now, looking at the evidence on Minho's screens, she began to wonder if there was more to her story than she'd ever imagined. "We need to find out what really happened to those children," she said, her voice steady despite the fear growing in her chest. "And we need to figure out why Park has been watching us all these years." Minho nodded and turned back to his computers. "Then let's dig deeper. But Gina, I have a feeling that once we find the truth, our lives are never going to be the same again." Outside the window, a shooting star streaked across the dawn sky. Or at least, that's what it looked like until Gina realized it was moving to slowly and changing direction. She watched. The light seemed to pulse in a pattern that felt oddly familiar, like a message she almost understood. 2 weeks later, Gina stood outside Genesis Tech's headquarters at midnight, her heart pounding like a drum. The building loomed against the starry sky, its glass walls reflecting the city lights below. Minho had spent days mapping the security system, finding blind spots in the camera coverage and weak points in their digital defenses. "Remember, you have exactly 17 minutes before the security guard makes his next round." Minho's voice crackled through her earpiece. "The service elevator on the 3rd floor will take you to the archive level without triggering." Motion sensors. Gina slipped through the loading dock using the keycard Minho had somehow acquired. She didn't ask how he got it. Some questions were better left unanswered. The building felt different at night, almost alive with the hum of servers and the soft glow of emergency lighting, following Minho's directions. She made her way through empty corridors lined with motivational posters about building tomorrows. Technology today. If only they knew how literally that slogan applied. The archive level looked like something from a science fiction movie. Rows of servers stretched into the darkness, their LED lights blinking like electronic stars. But it was the older section that interested her. Filing cabinets from the 1990s that contained physical documents from Park's charity days. Found the files. She whispered into her earpiece. "Good. Look for a folder marked Project New Dawn. That name keeps appearing in encrypted communications I've been monitoring." Gina's flashlight beam swept across labeled folders until she found it. A thick manila folder marked with symbols she didn't recognize alongside the English text. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The first document made her stomach drop. It was a report titled Extraterrestrial Technology Integration Protocol dated 30 years ago. The pages described the recovery of a damaged spacecraft from a remote mountain region, along with its pilot, a being they referred to only as Subject Alpha. According to the report, the alien had survived the crash but died from injuries before it could be properly studied. However, its ship contained technology beyond human understanding, including something called a genetic enhancement matrix. "Minho, are you getting this?" she whispered, photographing each page with her phone. "Yeah, I'm backing up everything to our secure server. Keep going." The next section contained photographs that made her gasp. The crashed ship looked like a silver teardrop, its surface covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change even in the still photos. Inside the craft, scientists in hazmat suits examined walls covered with holographic displays showing star maps and DNA sequences. But it was the pilot that truly shocked her. The being looked almost human, but with slightly larger eyes and elongated fingers. Its face was peaceful, almost sleeping, But there was something deeply sad about the expression. The pilot possessed advanced genetic modifications, read one report. Its DNA showed enhancement patterns that increased cognitive function, physical resilience, and sensory perception by factors of 300 to 500% compared to baseline human genetics. Gina flipped to the next section and found her own file. Her childhood photo was paper-clipped to medical records, genetic analysis reports, and progress monitoring sheets that spanned 15 years. Subject 23 shows exceptional integration with Enhancement Protocol 7. She read aloud, cognitive improvements exceed projections, memory retention at 99.7% accuracy, physical healing accelerated by factor of 12. Subject demonstrates intuitive understanding of complex mathematical and linguistic patterns without formal training. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. Every aspect of herself that she'd considered natural talent was actually the result of alien genetic modification performed when she was a child. The enhancement process required 3 phases. The report continued. Phase 1. Initial genetic modification through enhanced nutrition program. Phase 2. Environmental monitoring via specialized photo frames containing nanoscale scanners. Phase 3. Activation of dormant enhancements through targeted electromagnetic exposure. Gina, you need to see this. Minho's urgent voice cut through her reading. I'm picking up movement in the building. Multiple vehicles just pulled into the parking garage. She quickly photographed the remaining pages, her hands shaking as she read about Phase 3. The electromagnetic activation was scheduled to occur during what they called First Contact Protocol, when the alien evaluation team returned to Earth. The final page of her file contained a chilling note. Subject 23 designated as primary candidate for Ambassador Protocol. Enhanced genetics show highest compatibility with alien communication methods. Activation sequence to begin upon confirmation of evaluation team arrival. Gina, get out of there now. Minho's voice was sharp with panic. I'm seeing heat signatures moving up the stairwells. They know you're there. She grabbed the entire folder and ran toward the service elevator, but the soft ding of arriving elevators echoed through the archive level. Footsteps and voices carried through the darkness as security teams spread out to search the floor. Loading. Dock is compromised, Minho reported. But there's a maintenance tunnel that leads to the subway system. 3rd server row, behind the blue panel marked authorized personnel only. Gina found the panel and pried it open with her fingernails. Inside was a narrow tunnel that smelled of dust and old machinery. She crawled through the darkness, clutching the stolen files to her chest while voices and flashlight beams swept the area behind her. The tunnel opened into an abandoned subway maintenance room. Gina emerged covered in dust and cobwebs, her heart still racing from the close escape. But as she caught her breath, something in the files caught her attention that she'd missed before. There was a section about the alien pilot's final transmission. Before it died, using technology from the ship, scientists had managed to translate its last message. Evaluation postponed due to technical failure. Genetic enhancement of local species shows promise, but requires additional time for maturation. Will return when subjects reach full activation potential. Of designation, approved for a Phase 2 integration. The date of the expected return was circled in red ink. Exactly 6 months from today. Minho, we need to meet, she said into her earpiece, and we need to contact the others from the charity list. Because according to these files, we're not just enhanced humans. She looked up at the stars visible through a grate in the tunnel ceiling. Somewhere out there, an alien evaluation team was already on its way back to Earth, and when they arrived, they would expect to find their enhanced human ambassadors ready to represent their species. We're humanity's first line of defense, she whispered and none of us even know it yet. The folder contained one final document, a list of locations where the other enhanced subjects could be found, along with activation codes that would unlock their full potential. As Gina studied the star maps and genetic sequences, she realized that her life as a simple waitress was about to end forever. In 6 months, Earth would either join a galactic civilization or be declared too primitive to participate, and the decision would rest in the hands of a group of enhanced humans who didn't even know they weren't entirely human anymore. The weight of humanity's future suddenly pressed down on her shoulders as she climbed out of the tunnel and into the soul. Morning light. Everything she thought she knew about herself, about Earth, about humanity's place in the universe, had been a carefully constructed lie. But now she knew the truth. The question was, what was she going to do about it? Gina waited 3 days before confronting Park, using the time to gather her courage and plan exactly what she would say. She couldn't just walk into his office and demand answers. She needed leverage. So she did something that terrified her. She reached out to the other enhanced subjects. The first person she contacted was Dae-Hyun, the physicist. His secretary initially refused to put her through, but when Gina mentioned Project New Dawn, she was transferred immediately. "Where did you hear that name?" Dae-Hyun's voice was sharp with concern. "I think we need to talk," Gina replied. "All of us. 2 days." Later, 5 of them met at a quiet cafe in Gangnam. Dae-Hyun arrived first. Looking nervous in his expensive suit, Soo-jin came next, moving with the fluid grace of an Olympic athlete. Tae-ho entered wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy weather, and Min-seo looked round constantly as if expecting to be followed. "So we all remember the charity," Soo-jin said once they'd found a corner table away from other customers, "but none of us remember volunteering for experiments." "That's because we were children," Dae-Hyun replied grimly. "They disguised it as routine medical checkups and educational programs." Min-seo leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been working with biological samples that shouldn't exist on Earth. My supervisors told me. They came from deep ocean exploration, but the genetic structures are completely alien. And I've been developing technology that's decades ahead of anything humans should be able to create." Tae-ho added, "Sometimes I wake up knowing how to build things I've never seen before. Like the knowledge was just planted in my brain." Gina shared everything she'd discovered in the Genesis tech files. Watching their faces grew pale as she described the crashed alien ship and the genetic enhancement program. When she finished, they sat in stunned silence. "We need answers," Dae-Hyun finally said, "and there's only one person who can give them to us." That evening, Gina stood outside Park's penthouse building again. But this time she wasn't sneaking in as a waitress. She walked through the front lobby and took the elevator straight to the top floor, her enhanced hearing picking up the rapid heartbeat of the security guard who recognized her from the catering event. Park was waiting when the elevator doors opened, as if he'd been expecting her. He looked older than she remembered, with worry lines creasing his face and shadows under his eyes. "I wondered when you'd figure it out," he said quietly, gesturing for her to enter his apartment. The penthouse looked different without the party guests. More personal, more human. Family photos sat on side tables, and books about quantum physics and alien civilizations filled the shelves. But Gina's attention was drawn to a large display screen showing what looked like a countdown. Timer: 180 for days. 7 hours, 23 minutes. "What happens when that reaches 0? She asked. Park's shoulders sagged. "The evaluation team returns." He moved to his desk and activated a holographic projector. The air above them filled with images of space, star systems, planets, and massive ships that dwarfed anything in human science fiction. 30 years ago, Earth was visited by scouts from the Galactic Federation. Park began, his voice heavy with the weight of secrets. They came to evaluate whether humanity was ready to join the interstellar community. The hologram showed Earth from space. But something was wrong with the image. Parts of the planet looked darker. More damaged than Gino remembered from satellite. Photos. We failed the evaluation. Park continued. Badly. Was environmental destruction. Social inequality. They determined that humanity was too primitive and dangerous to be trusted with advanced technology. So they left us alone. Not exactly. Park manipulated the hologram, showing the crashed ship Gina had seen in the files. One of their scouts suffered a mechanical failure during departure. The ship crashed in the mountains of North Korea, and the pilot died from injuries before our teams could provide medical assistance. The display shifted to show the alien pilot, the same peaceful face Gina had seen in the photographs. But now she could see details that hadn't been visible in the still images. The pilot's skin had a faint luminescent quality, and there were small, intricate patterns along its temples that seemed to pulse with their own light. Before it died, the pilot transmitted a final message to its superiors, Bach said. It recommended giving humanity one more chance, but only if we could prove we were capable of evolution, genetic enhancement. The pilot's people had modified themselves over thousands of years, improving their intelligence, empathy, and physical capabilities. They believed that if humans could do the same, we might be worthy of joining their civilization. The hologram now showed the interior of the alien ship, with walls covered in complex diagrams that looked like genetic codes mixed with star charts. The ship's computer contained the blueprints for their enhancement technology, Park explained. But using it on adult humans was too dangerous. The changes had to be made during childhood, when the genetic structure was still flexible. Gina felt sick as the pieces fell into place. So you found orphans and children from poor families, kids who wouldn't be missed if something went wrong. I saved humanity, Park replied, his voice rising with desperation. Do you understand what's at stake here? In 6 months, the evaluation team returns. If we can prove that humans are capable of genetic advancement, they'll share their technology with us. Clean energy that could reverse climate change, medical treatments that could eliminate disease, transportation that could take us to the stars. He gestured at the holographic display, which now showed images that made Jean's heart sink. Oceans choked with plastic, forests reduced to wasteland, cities struggling with rising sea levels and extreme weather. Without their help, Earth has maybe 50 years before environmental collapse makes the planet uninhabitable, Park said. The enhanced subjects represent humanity's only hope of proving we deserve to survive, and if we refuse to help, Gina asked. Park's face went pale. Then, when the evaluation team arrives, they'll find a species that rejected the gift of evolution. Earth will be quarantined permanently. No contact with the galactic community. No access to the technologies that could save us. The countdown timer continued its relentless march toward zero as Park showed her more images from the alien ship's database. Worlds that had passed their evaluations now thrived in a network of peaceful civilizations. Planets that had failed were left to struggle alone, many eventually becoming uninhabitable. You're our best success, Gina, Park said, turning off the hologram and facing her directly. Your genetic integration is nearly perfect. The alien technology responds to you in ways it doesn't to the others. When the evaluation team arrives, you'll be able to communicate with them directly. Mind to mind, you experimented on children, Gina repeated, her voice trembling with anger and confusion. I gave children a future. Park shot back. I gave humanity a future. Yes, I made impossible choices. Yes, I crossed ethical lines that should never be crossed. But in 6 months, when alien ships appear in Earth's sky, the only thing that will matter is whether we can prove we deserve to join the galactic community. Gina stared at the countdown timer, watching the seconds tick away. 180 for days until humanity's final judgment. 180 for days to decide whether to embrace the artificial evolution that had been forced upon her, or to reject it and condemn her species to isolation and eventual extinction. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" she whispered. Puck activated another holographic display, this one showing the faces of all the enhanced subjects. Daehyun with his quantum communication devices, Sujin with her impossible athletic abilities, Taiho with his revolutionary energy technology, Minseo with her knowledge of alien biology. "Help me activate the others," he said. "Help me prepare them for what's coming, and when the evaluation team arrives, stand with me as humanity's first ambassador to the stars." The weight of the decision pressed down on Gina's shoulders as she realized that the choice wasn't just about her own life anymore. It was about the future of every person on Earth, and whether humanity would join the galactic community or face extinction alone in the darkness of space. Gina stared at the countdown timer for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. 180 for days. The number burned in her mind like a brand. In less than 6 months, everything would change. Either humanity would join a galactic civilization, or Earth would be left to die slowly in isolation. "I need time to think," she finally said. Backing toward the elevator, Park nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Take all the time you need. But remember, every day we delay is a day less to prepare." The next 3 weeks were the hardest of Gina's life. She continued working at Blue Moon Restaurant, serving customers and pretending everything was normal. But how could anything be normal when she knew that humanity's future hung in the balance? She met with the other enhanced subjects regularly. Daehyun showed them quantum communication devices that could send messages across galaxies instantly. Sujin demonstrated her ability to move in zero gravity as if she'd been born among the stars. Taiho revealed solar panel technology that could power entire cities with the energy from a single rooftop. "We're not entirely human anymore," Minseo said during one of their meetings. "But we're not fully alien either. We're something new. The question is," Daehyun added, "what do we do with that?" Gina thought about her parents constantly during those weeks. They had died in that apartment fire because they couldn't afford proper electrical wiring. They had lived their entire lives struggling for basic necessities that others took for granted. How many millions of people around the world were facing the same struggles right now? She researched the alien technology that Park had described, clean energy that could end fossil fuel dependence, medical treatments that could eliminate cancer, heart disease, and genetic disorders, agricultural techniques that could end world hunger, transportation systems that could connect Earth to hundreds of other inhabited worlds. But there was a darker side to consider too. What if the aliens were lying? What if joining their galactic community meant losing human independence? What if the evaluation was actually the first step in a conquest plan? "I've been monitoring deep space communications," Daehyun told her during one of their private conversations. "The signals I'm picking up, they're not aggressive. If anything, they seem almost sad, like they genuinely want to help. But they've seen too many species destroy themselves to take risks anymore." Gina made her decision. On a rainy Thursday evening, while serving coffee to a family celebrating their daughter's acceptance to medical school, the parents were crying with joy, talking about how their daughter would be the first in their family to become a doctor. But Gina could see the worry in their eyes too. Medical school was expensive. and they weren't sure how they'd pay for it. She thought about a world where medical knowledge from advanced alien civilizations could be freely shared, where diseases that plagued humanity for thousands of years could be cured with treatments that cost almost nothing to produce, where no parent would have to choose between their child's education and their family's survival. That night, she called Park. "I'll help," she said simply. "But we do this differently. No more secrets, no more lies, and no more experiments on children." "Agreed," Park replied, and she could hear the relief in his voice. "What do you propose over the next month?" They developed a plan that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. Instead of hiding the truth, they decided to gradually prepare humanity for a first contact. Daehyun began publishing papers about quantum communication breakthroughs. Sujin started training other athletes in zero-gravity techniques. Taiho released his solar panel designs to universities around the world. The initial reactions were mixed. Some people dismissed the new technologies as hoaxes. Others worried about the implications of such rapid advancement. But gradually, as the technologies proved themselves, excitement began to build. "The key is making people feel like partners, not subjects," Gina explained to a gathering of world leaders that Park had secretly arranged. "Humanity deserves to know what's coming and have a voice in how we respond." The leaders were skeptical at first, but when Daehyun demonstrated instant communication with a probe he'd sent to Jupiter, their doubt turned to amazement. When Minseo showed them biological samples that could only have come from another world, they began to understand the magnitude of what they were facing. President Kim of South Korea was the first to speak after the demonstration. "How long do we have to prepare?" "For months," Park replied. "Maybe less." The next few months passed in a blur of activity. Governments around the world began quietly preparing their populations for the possibility of contact with an alien civilization. Scientists worked round the clock to understand and replicate the enhanced technologies. Military leaders developed protocols for peaceful first contact scenarios. Gina found herself at the center of it all, serving as a bridge between the enhanced subjects and normal humanity. Her ability to understand complex concepts intuitively made her invaluable in explaining alien technology to human scientists. Her experience as a waitress, dealing with all kinds of people, helped her communicate with world leaders and ordinary citizens alike. But she never stopped working at Blue Moon Restaurant. Every morning, she put on her uniform and served coffee and breakfast to regular customers who had no idea their waitress was preparing to become humanity's first ambassador to the stars. "Why do you keep working here?" Manager Kim asked her one day. "I know you've been consulting on some big government project. You could probably afford to quit." Gina smiled as she wiped down a table. "This job reminds me why I'm doing all of this. Every person who comes through the door deserves a chance at a better life." The day finally arrived with less fanfare than anyone expected. Gina was taking orders for the breakfast shift when Minho's voice crackled through her hidden earpiece. "There, here," he said simply. She looked up through the restaurant's windows and saw them. 5 silver ships descending slowly through the clouds above Seoul. They were beautiful, shaped like teardrops with surfaces that seemed to shift between mirror-bright and transparent. No aggressive movements, no weapons visible, just peaceful descent toward landing zones that had been prepared months in advance. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the voice of President Kim through every television and radio in the city. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter in human history." Gina untied her apron and handed it to Manager Kim. "I have to go," she said, "but I'll be back tomorrow for the evening shift." He stared at her in confusion as she walked toward the door. "Gina, where are you going?" She turned back with a smile. "To work my other job. An hour later, she stood in a field outside Seoul alongside world leaders, scientists, and the other enhanced subjects. The alien ships had landed gracefully, their surfaces now transparent enough to see the beings inside. They looked exactly like the pilot who had crashed 30 years earlier. Tall, graceful, with large eyes that seemed to hold infinite sadness and hope. As the ship's doors opened, Gina felt something activate in her mind. Suddenly, she could sense the thoughts and emotions of the beings approaching them. They weren't conquerors or judges. They were teachers, hoping desperately that humanity had learned to overcome its limitations. The lead alien approached her directly, its large eyes meeting hers. When it spoke, the words formed directly in her mind. "Child of two worlds," it said, "you have grown well. Are your people ready to join the greater family of stars?" Gina looked back at the crowd of humans watching nervously from behind military barriers. She thought of the customers at Blue Moon Restaurant, working hard every day just to survive. She thought of her parents, who had died before seeing this impossible day. She thought of all the enhanced subjects who had struggled with their artificial abilities, never knowing why they were different. "We're ready to learn," she replied, both aloud and telepathically. "We're ready to grow. We're ready to become something better than we were." The alien's expression shifted into what might have been a smile. "Then welcome to the galactic community. Humanity. There is much work to be done." As more ships descended from the sky and crowds of humans cheered in cities around the world, Gina made herself a promise. Tomorrow, she would return to Blue Moon Restaurant for her evening shift. She would serve coffee and take orders and listen to customers talk about their hopes and dreams, because no matter how far humanity traveled among the stars, no matter what incredible technologies they gained access to, no matter how much they evolved and grew, they would always need people who remembered where they came from and why the journey mattered. The enhanced humans had passed their test. But the real work of proving humanity's worth was just beginning. The E&D